Alrighty, so today we're going to talk about the New England Revolution in the Moving Forward series episode. It's only fitting the fact that I'm doing this Moving Forward series episode after another disastrous performance that they had in the hands against the Columbus Crew, which we'll talk about later today after the Vancouver and Seattle game concluded, and we'll do the two-game review of the final two-game before we head to Decision Day 2024 of the MLS regular season. There's no doubt that it's been a disastrous year for the New England Revolution. In fact, if I would to make a video about the most disappointing teams so far this season, I would say New England is probably right up there in terms of number one of being the most disappointing team this year, because this is a team that was supposed to compete for playoffs or maybe even on the verge of being an MLS Cup contender, because they have most of those guys that last year were crippled with injuries back, and it looked like things were going to go well. And even though hiring Caleb Porter, it is, I would say, kind of a gamble with the way that, yes, he has had success before with previous club, but then he also has some very down year, and not to mention he is a guy that, yeah, he's not afraid in terms of sounding off in his post game press conference, which sometimes could be a negative kind of thing. But yeah, it turns out this was an absolute disaster for a season, and that, as I mentioned about Caleb Porter, and I'll probably mention it again this moving forward series episode, I have no idea how he's still the head coach of the New England Revolution. Like the fact that I mentioned how it looked like he was a dead man walking back in June, and yes, New England did have a relatively good run of form after that, but then after the month of June, they went back to where they were in the beginning of the season, which is just kind of being a bottom feeder. And if it wasn't for the Chicago Fire also having a similar tire fire season, and also just kind of collapsing once again in September, this team should be right now in terms of dead last in the Eastern Conference, as they have been for most of this year. Now, currently, they have a 9-4-20 record, and they have 31 points. They've only scored 35 goals this season, which is tied with Nashville in terms of the fewest amount of goals anyone have scored right now in the league, and they gave up 68 goals so far this season. I can not believe that there was actually a team that even came close in terms of the San Jose Earthquakes of the most goals conceded this season, but here we are, the New England Revolution, 68 goals conceded this season. The defense was as as, as bad as the offense gets, and not to mention their goal differential is also minus 33, which is also one of the worst in the league. They're currently 14th in the Eastern Conference, and depending on if Chicago does win their final game and they don't win their final game against Inter Miami, which most likely that seems like it is going to be the case, they could finish the season as the worst team in the Eastern Conference. Now, looking at the last 5 seasons for New England, well, for the past couple of years, it's been a bit up and down. Obviously, we know what happened last year. Yes, they made it to the playoffs in fifth place with team 10-9 record, and they finished with 55 points. But don't let that record distract you from the fact that there was a certain off the field situation that happened near the end of the season that pretty much linger into the on-field product, and it just got ugly to a point where, yeah, it feels like ever since that Bruce Arena situation, this team has been going down and down to a point where it's almost near rock bottom moment, and almost near what we saw back in the mid 2010s and the Brad Frito era, when this team were considered to be one of the dumpster fire team in the Eastern Conference. But before that, they finished in 10th place with a 10-12-12 record. That was a year where they were in the CONCACAF Champions League, as it was called back then. They lost to Pumas and really just completely collapsed against Pumas in one of the knockout round game, and that kind of took a toll of their season. Finished with 10-12-12 record, finished with 42 points, missing out on the playoffs. But then in 2021, this is by far the best season only the New England Revolution has ever had. This is the best season that any team has had, although that could definitely change depending on what happened on decision day, if Miami can beat New England, and how it's kind of fitting that game, not only for New England, even though on paper they have nothing to play for, they do have to have the protect their points record to play for, because if Miami does win against New England on that final day, Miami will be the team that has the most point ever in a regular season. But for now, New England does have the most point and it came in the 2021 season when they finished first with 22-7-5 record and finished with 73 points. And then in the COVID shortened season, they finished in eighth place with an 8-8-7 record and finished with 32 points. Ironically, that year is still to this day in terms of this current core that New England has had is the deepest that they have got in the playoffs. And what's crazy is that that was a year where we thought that they weren't ready to compete for playoffs and that they went on a bit of a Cinderella run, went all the way into the Eastern Conference Final and just fall short to the Columbus Crew, and ironically fall short to a Caleb Porter Columbus Crew side back in the COVID shortened season. But before that, they did finish in seventh place with an 11, 12, and 11 record and finished with 45 points. And again, back then, this was just kind of the beginning of this new core that seems like it's been developed that New England currently has that a core that looked like they were on verge of potentially break through and maybe even make an appearance in MLS Cup, and they haven't really quite do that. Although at least you can say that this current core at least did win a trophy, and that of course is the supporter shield back in the 2021 season. Now looking at the top goal scorer of this team, surprisingly we actually had a player that is pretty close in terms of the double digit goal scoring mark. I mean, when you score only 35 goals, which I mentioned the fewest in in the league. I wasn't expecting anyone coming close to finish with 10 goals, but Veroni actually came close to 9 goals. And, we'll definitely talk about Giacomo Veroni and that there's definitely going to be a dilemma that New England will have to face about him this off season. But then you got Carlos Hill with 7 goals, Ismail Baratovic with 3 goals, Bobby Wood with 3 goals, and Emil Boateng with 2 goals. Top assist leader, unsurprisingly, is Carlos Hill with 10 assists. Then you got Ian Hartz with 4 assists, Ismail Baratovic with 3 assists, Dylan Barrero with 3 assists, and Iman Boateng also rounds up the top five assist leader with 2 assists. Now, the best win of the season, yeah, there's not really a lot that I can choose about New England because, I would say that arguably maybe the best win that they have, there was two that can come in mind, and one of them is actually on this board. One that I'll mention besides the 2-1 win that they have on the road against Cincinnati, because I think I chose this as the best win because back then Cincinnati was still a really good team, and it was kind of a bit of a surprise that they were able to knock off Cincinnati at TQL Stadium. And sure, yes, Cincinnati were down to 10 men in that game, but this was a New England team that again, back in June, it seems like this team looked like they were started to find some life, and that obviously is why I think is the best win of the season. But I also want to get honorable mention in terms of the 5-0 win that they had on the road against Montreal. And again, this was back before when Montreal really kind of got into a good run of form to get where they are in the standings. Look like they're on the driver's seat of making the playoffs. But yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that those 2 wins really are kind of the best win of the season. There's not a lot of choose for New England this year. The worst loss of the season, well, there was definitely a lot that I could choose, but I got to go with the 2-1 loss that they had against East United. Again, that was really the playoff 6 pointer. They need to win that game if they want to keep their playoff hopes alive, and they weren't able to do that. A couple more honorable mention or dishonorable mention in terms of the worst loss season. I mean, getting absolutely destroyed by Inter Miami in front of 60,000 fans that were there to see Messi and friends there. That was not a great feeling. And then they also lost 4-0 earlier this season against RSL, but that was a good RSL side, and that game could have been even more ugly if RSL would have took more of their chances. So yeah, there was a lot that I could have chosen as a worst loss of the season, but I chose this mainly because again, they had to win this one against DC, and I know DC is playing well, but in a playoff 6 pointer like that, you cannot lose at home and ultimately find yourself eliminated from the playoffs. Now, in terms of average attendance, 30,353. Now, obviously, I know some will say, well, a lot of that is mainly because they had that one game against Inter Miami where that number was heavily fluctuated because they had 60,000 plus in that game. But I will say this, besides that game, I would say that the Revs attendance has been actually really good this season at Gillette Stadium. In fact, in games that they did not play against Inter Miami, they were still having a lot of fans in attendance. In fact, I think the game against DC, they had like something like 35,000 in attendance at Gillette Stadium. And for a team that is on the fringe of getting eliminated, that is impressive. Now, I don't know if that is part of the package that New England probably had, where I'm pretty sure some of these teams does this, where they have a package where if you want to attend the game between them and Inter Miami and see Messi and friends, then you have to play this certain package, which will also include other games, and it gets a very good deal in terms of not only for these teams to get the fans to pay for that game a little bit cheaper than just the standalone game, but also potentially go to other games to help draw the local interest and I'll, as I said before, this is a team that when this team is decent, there's no doubt the fans are going to show up, and even when they're not decent as this year as is, it's kind of proven the fans, of course, have show up as well, which is also kind of the reason why they need that new soccer stadium. And we'll also talk about how that's unfortunately is a bad news that New England also had on top of numerous lists of disastrous things that they had this year. Now, in terms of MVP this year, I mean, it's Carlos Hill. There's no debate about that. It's been Carlos Hill for the past couple of years, and it's Carlos Hill again. And while it's kind of a bit of a down season for him as well, and once again he's kind of suffering through some injuries, and not to mention he is starting to get a little bit older. I will say that he's still considered one of the best number 10 in the league, and a number 10 that is just a changer for the New England Revolution, and they're hoping that Father Time doesn't catch up to him next year as well, and not to mention trying to stay healthy. Disappointment. This one was a little bit tougher because there were definitely some good candidate, or should I say dishonorable candidate in terms of the disappointment list. But in the end, I'm gonna go with Henrik Ravis, who I don't think he's actually with this team anymore. And I know, after what we saw in the last two goalkeepers that have played for the New England Revolution, it's always gonna be tough to try to live up to the shoes that both Georgi Mihailovic, or not Georgi Mihailovic, Georgi Petrovic, got the wrong Georgi there for a second. That Georgi Petrovic and also Matt Turner left as the goalkeeper for this Revs team. And Henrik Ravis, I wasn't expecting him to live up to those hype, but he definitely had a good resume to at least be a decent number one for this ref side, and no, he was not. I mean, he was an absolute disaster. It's going to go down as one of the worst signing we've seen this season. I mean, he was pretty much bench after around 8 games and pretty much never being seen again before eventually sold off. So yeah, that has got to be a huge disappointment, and to a point where now that they have a new goalkeeper in Ayaz Ivicic, and I would say that he's okay, but as I've seen with Ivicic doing his time with the Timbers, he's kind of a goalkeeper that's a little bit inconsistent. He has had his good games and can make you some incredible save, but he also has had some bad games as well. And not to mention, he has had many games this season where that back line of New England was pretty much completely non-existent. Young player to watch. Now I could have put Noah Buck in there if he was still with the Revs, and technically he is. He's only going on loan with Southampton, but I'm gonna go with Ismir Bajatovic. I mean, this is a pretty easy one. New England quietly has kind of assembled some really good young talent, and as I mentioned, Noah Buck is one of the example. Ismir Bajatovic is another one, especially with him breaking into the Bosnian team, and that this again just another reminder what a big waste opportunity is for this U.S. team to basically lure him to the U.S. instead of lure him to his other country that he can represent. Because I do think that he has a lot of talent, and he even showed when he was representing with Bosnia as well. So yeah, this is a guy that there's no doubt that I think people should watch out for, and could be just similar to what we saw with Noah Buck eventually maybe get sold off to Europe for a big sum of money. So what went right for this New England team? Yeah, again, anytime when I do these kind of bottom feeder, it's hard to talk about what went right, and I think especially for New England too, this one was probably one of the toughest. Besides maybe the Quakes, I think this was one of the ones that I really had to nitpick. And one of the nitpick I said is at least this season it is about to be done. This disastrous season is about to move on. Good attendance again, for a team that is near the bottom of the standings for most of the year. The fact that Revs fans still show up day in and day out, kudos to those fans, of course, out there. And then, of course, if I really don't want to nitpick, I'll say the young breakout Noah Buck and Ismail Baratovic. That's definitely promising to see that the Revs can develop some good young talent out of their academy and eventually could potentially sold them off for a big amount of money. And there's also still some players on this team that coming out of the academy that I definitely will have my eyes on heading into next season. One player is going to be Peyton Miller. He has looked really good so far in his early days ever since breaking into the first team, and that could be another guy that could be following the footstep of Noah Buck and Ismail Bajatovic as another great homegrown player coming from the Revolution Academy and eventually do well in MLS and maybe sold off for a sizable amount of money in the future as well. So what went wrong for this team? Yeah, pretty much every part of this team was bad. And when I say every part of this team was bad, I mean it. I mean, there's a reason why I capitalized bad in all caps and put two exclamation mark. I mean, nothing has gone right for the New England Revolution when it comes to the entire team. The goalkeeping has been a mess, as I mentioned, earlier. Henrik Ravis, definitely not the goalkeeper to step in the shoes that was left from Georgi Petrovic. The defense pretty much non-existent for out of the season, and they actually completely redo their defense in the summer transfer window as well. And something tells me they might have to do it again heading into the off season because even with the redo, it doesn't seem like it's gotten any better. The midfield also has been a mess as well. They also move on from a couple of core pieces. DeJuan Jones is a good example of it. No longer with this team. And then on the attacking end, again, just besides Carlos Hill, there's really nobody on this attack that you can say that are a difference maker of this team. And Carlos Hill can only do so much if no one on this team can step up. And part of that is, Veroni, another very disappointing season. Yes, I know he's the top goal scorer, and at times he have kind of shown that talent that he can be a quality DP player. But yeah, more times than not, he hasn't really quite show that whatsoever. And again, big decision has got to be made about him this offseason as well. Injuries once again doomed this team. Again, we talked about last year, they suffer a bit of an injury but crisis, and it was kind of the same thing. A lot of players were injured once again to a point where you're gonna really have to question the medical staff and also that turf at Gillette Stadium that has caused injury time and time again. And one example of this earlier in this season, they lost Thomas John Kalai to an ACL injury. It just feels like for the last two seasons they cannot catch a break in terms of losing to the player due to long term injury um, early in the season or even in the middle of the season. And then player return to injury were not the same. So as I mentioned, part of the reason why it's been such a disastrous season is those players that were coming back from injury, you expect them to do well, and no, they did not. So guys like Dylan Barrero and Brendan Bye are the two big example guys that just they look so good before they suffer those torn ACL injury, and then coming back they just don't look like the same. And that of course can happen because anytime when you come back from a torn ACL injury, whether you're an older player or a younger player, it's hard to try and be the same player that you were before the injury, and you just hope that maybe those guys can get themselves back to full fitness heading into next season as well. Because something tells me that maybe some of those guys were not even completely fit when they returned. They might have even rushed it because again, it just looked like those two guys I mentioned. They looked like a shell of their old self before both of them suffering ACL injury last year. And then, of course, a bonus fact is that the new stadium bill, of course, fell in the state vote. I mean, that's another thing that's got to be crushing because again, they're doing everything to trying to get this new stadium. You cannot not say that New England and the Kraft family ownership group is not trying to get out of Gillette Stadium, build themselves their own soccer specific stadium near the Boston area. But unfortunately, Massachusetts State legislator have other ideas, and we'll see whether or not they'll come up with a revised plan to try to get that done. Because again, I think New England is probably one of the last team in MLS. Well, between them and maybe the Chicago Fire are and in some extent Charlotte FC as well are the three teams that I feel like they need new stadium because the stadium that they currently play, which is an NFL stadium, it's a very MLS 1.0 era kind of thing that they just feel like it just feel like it's a bygone era and that they need to move on and build themselves a new soccer specific stadium. So moving forward, for this Revs team, obviously, as I mentioned, how is Caleb Porter still here? And if he does stay, which it feels like that seems like more of the case. I mean, I know that every time I'm just thinking that eventually they're gonna have to fire Caleb Porter, and there could be a case that they could do so at the end of the season, or maybe even following this 4-0 loss against Columbus. But if they do decide to have him return, which again I won't be surprised because if he's lasted this long, something tells me the ownership really believe that he is the right man to do. Can he work his second year magic that he did with the Columbus Crew? And in some extents, he did the same thing for the Portland Timbers as well. Is he, of course, the right man to do so? Because if not, they're definitely going to be going back to the coaching carousel and the coaching thing, career center in terms of looking for a new head coach to guide this team back to where they were a couple of years ago. Can they free up a DP spot? So obviously, as much as I know that they're gonna make some big changes this offseason, one of the big problem is that they can't really sign a difference maker, mainly because they're all locked up in all three of their DP spot. And the only DP spot I can think that they can maybe got rid of is Giacomo Veroni. And again, there's a big decision that has to be made about him. And what's tough about this big decision is that his contract is not going to end until next season. So as much as they really want to offload him, and they can of course decide to use a buyout on him because I think New England does have a buyout. Do they decide to use it for him? Because again, he's been very underwhelming ever since he's coming to this team. Has literally they came nowhere close in terms of living up to that DP tag. I won't say he's considered to be one of the worst DP9 ever come into this league. I have seen worse, but he's definitely right up there in terms of being a bust in terms of arriving as a designated player in that number 9 role. So we'll see whether or not if they can exercise that buyout and maybe free up a DP spot and once again look for a DP number 9. For a while, I heard that there was a rumor that they were going to bring back Adam Buxa, but it seems like that rumor is no longer the case, and maybe they'll move on to bring in another DP kind of player. And then, of course, the third thing for them is that they need major overhaul in terms of the depth and TAM quality player. And again, part of that we kind of saw during the summer transfer window. They definitely bring in some pieces in the summer transfer window to try to improve. The likes of Will Sands, Tim Parker, and even Javier Arriaga from Seattle. Yeah, they were trying to bring these pieces to maybe hope that these are the pieces for them to make a playoff run, and it just hasn't really quite worked out whatsoever. So there's no doubt that they might need to think about doing a major overhaul as well, especially Tim Parker as well. I don't think his contract is going to head into next season as well. And I know there's a lot of guys on this Revs team that pretty much have expiring contract that they can decline their playoff option heading into the offseason. And I expect there's going to be a lot that will be declined because again, they just have no depth whatsoever. And besides some of those high end talent, the player that they have. This team is just a complete show. It's almost kind of feel like it's in some way it's similar to what we see with Toronto FC, where on one hand, when you look at some of the high end talent they have, legitimately they can definitely be a team that compete for playoffs. But when you look deeper down, and once those players does get injured, yeah, it's a complete husk to a point where it's nowhere near in terms of being a team that could win you games game in and game out and can get you to be a bottom feeder like what New England is currently are. So there's no doubt that they're gonna have to try to overhaul all that, and they'll definitely look to sign those players. What I'm also saying is it should be a very busy summer for the New England Revolution, and next season I mean, this is where it's a big question of do they have enough in terms of competing for next season, especially some of the core pieces that they have on this team. They've already got rid of some of the core pieces. Are we heading into a period where New England may be going through a transitional period? And if not, they might even be in a transitional period right now with some of the pieces that they got rid of and some of them that are adding in the summer transfer window. We shall see as we head into the off season and heading next season as well. There you have it. That is pretty much it. Looking at the New England Revolution in terms of the Moving Forward series episode. As always, let me know in the comments below what do you think of this video, and if you're a Revs fan, what do you think is the MVP disappointment young player to watch? What went right, what went wrong, and most importantly, moving forward, how is this team going to look heading into next season? But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.